Reggie here, your friendly neighborhood bodybuilder and comic book collector, and I want to welcome you to another one of my live streams. I was not intending to actually go live here today, but I had to jump on here for just a couple of moments after seeing some interesting news over the last couple of hours and also having an opportunity to go back to some of the source material and check some facts. And what I realized is that there is some fake news out there. And anytime there's fake news, I feel like, I want to comment on it because I like this breaking news kind of stuff. I like this in the moment reaction kind of thing. Just because it's kind of fun and it's kind of different. So I'm not sure how many people are actually going to join because this is a very unusual time for me to be jumping on here. And you actually don't even see very many live streams during the day, especially the early part of the day. But there's some things that I want to do with the family a little bit later, so I wanted to jump on here. So I just saw a couple of people pop into the room, and then I also just saw ME3 Comics give a super chat, so definitely I appreciate that, brother, and good morning to you as well. Let me say a quick hello to some people here in the room, and then we'll get started with the purpose of this discussion. So Chris is here. Victor, happy new year to you, brother. Whitewell is in the house. How you doing? Sith 713 Lord is here. Glad you were able to finally make a live stream, bud. Brandon is in the house. How you doing? He says, what up, doe? Not much. Or as my brother would say, chillin', chillin', chillin'. Heavy Hammer, my powerlifting brother, it is good to see you. Discovery Bay Comics is in the house. Bake the Snake, Doominator X is here. Chad Lee, Wilbert is here. Ruben, and also Henry. So a fair number of people. I think there's a couple of new people here that I've never seen before. So welcome to the live stream. I absolutely appreciate you guys taking time out of your morning to actually join. This is that period between like Christmas and New Year's when you don't even know like what day it is, much less what time it is. I honestly have no clue what day of the week it is, and it doesn't matter because I'm not going back to work for several more days. And I've actually enjoyed this time off. So the reason for this live stream is that I recently, as of the last several hours, have been seeing some news about Kevin Feige and this major announcement that Kevin Feige has made. And I'm watching the headlines and I'm like, there is so much excitement about this. Let me go get the facts, right? And I tell you guys this all the time, do your research, right? So I went and I listened to the 51-minute interview that Kevin Feige just did for a podcast because I wanted to hear for myself. I wanted to see the news myself about this big announcement. And basically what HME3 says, if he had to spoil it for me, it's Saturday. Thank you, brother. Thankfully, I still don't have to go back to work for several more days. So, but there's this news out there about Kevin Feige and this announcement. And so I went back and I watched the source material, or listened to it, I should say, because it's a podcast. And basically the headlines that are out there are basically saying that the Fantastic Four, the X-Men, and these other Fox assets are going to be integrated back into the MCU within the next 6 months. And that just isn't true. It just isn't true. And, there were some articles that were saying, hey, it's about to happen in the next 6 months. Kevin Feige said so. So you better get your, X-Men and Fantastic Four, keys right now because they're about to explode, right? And this just goes back to a conversation Whitewell is here in the room that Whitewell and I were having where we did a video series. He and I tag teamed to talk about scarcity and rarity. And one of the things that we talked about is scarcity is essentially like market hype that makes you feel compelled to take some action, to do something. It gives the perception of rarity. It gives you the perception that something is imminent and about to happen, and therefore you need to take action, right? And so as I'm reading these headlines, I'm like, if this isn't some fake news, speculative hype stuff, I don't know what is. Right? So when you go back and you listen to the 51-minute interview, it's probably like the last 8 minutes that they even get into the Fox Disney deal. And essentially the question that was asked by this podcaster was, have you been given the go-ahead to start integrating the Fox assets, this toy box, this sandbox, into your, thought process? And Kevin Feige's response is he's been given an indication that the deal is going well and that the deal may wrap up in the next 6 months. That's essentially my interpretation of like Kevin Feige's response, because with Kevin Feige, I think he's sometimes purposefully cryptic about the things that he says because he doesn't want to create any kind of speculative hype out there, right? Like the podcaster even asked him a question like, what kind of movies do you want to make that you haven't yet made? And Kevin Feige's response is, well, if I tell you that, then that's going to cause people to believe that that's what the next movie is. And so basically what he was saying was that this deal isn't probably going to be complete for like the next 6 months. And so they have not yet begun to think about how to integrate these Fox assets into the MCU. But for whatever reason, people interpreted that a slightly different way. And they interpreted it as if these characters could start making cameos and appearances in the next 6 months. And I just don't know if that is indeed true. And so, with this proliferation of these headlines, and there's a lot of them out there, right, that maybe this is also going to artificially inflate some of the prices that we actually see for these keys. And there was even speculation that what happened with X-Men 101, which is behind me, is that book came out, or the announcement about the movie came out, and the book skyrocketed. The book took off. And this book was actually on my want list for 18, and it actually took off, and I kind of walked away from it. And then the trailer comes out, and people are like, ooh, that trailer is trash. And then they had to reshoot sections of it, and they were like, oh, this is really trash. And so that book started to calm down. And so one of the articles even speculated that potentially the news about the integration of the X-Men into the MCU might facilitate keeping the value of X-Men 101 afloat, despite the fact that the trailer and the reshoots weren't living up to the expectation and or had to be done, right? And so it's just interesting, the clickbait, the speculation, the inferences that are being made about what is really in my opinion, a misinterpretation of a 2-minute, 1-minute response to a question. It really was fascinating. So I want to get caught up with the chat here before I go on to my next couple of thoughts here. Just call us the Legion of Doom because we're in the greatest tag team in the history. What are you talking about? Whitewell is hilarious. Chris Barrett says, but we need some hype right now because we're in a dip in hype. That is true, brother. That is true. In the absence of information, people like to make stuff up. And so maybe a little bit of information with some speculation is a good thing, I guess. Realistically, they're probably still 2 to 3 years away. Bake the Snake, you are right, my man. I personally don't think that we're going to see anything before 2020, right? Because, and let me get back to that. So I do think 2020. Chris Barrett says he would say a year or two. Wilbert says he loves Sophie Turner, but she is absolutely terrible, Jean Grey. I'm not going to have an opinion on that. I think she's an attractive woman, though. Yes, stomp the hype so I can buy them, then release the hype. That was a fake announcement. Yes, it indeed. I thought we were gonna. No, you are not getting my secret to toothpaste, my friend. It's like that old school stuff, man. We use baking soda and water over here. Who remembers that from back in the day? You wake up in the morning, you realize you don't have any toothpaste. It is baking soda and water, and it is all full. I'm still from the old school. My mom used to make cough syrup out of an onion and honey. All right, so I think there was a comment here. Yeah, Bake the Snake. Yeah, I'm telling you, Heavy Hammer Jim, brother. I am not surprised you have done that, right? So I again think that we are probably a couple of years away from seeing the X-Men and the Fantastic Four movies. Maybe a cameo sooner than that, but my belief is that it's going to take some time for them to really like get these assets and to start wrapping their hands around how best to integrate these assets into the work that's already been done. Because when you think about it, I don't think that Marvel Studios has made a major announcement about anything in about 4 years, right? And you guys can correct me on that. But what they've done in 10 years is approximately 20 movies. So 10 years of time, 20 movies have been made, and they've made some crazy amount of money. There's no doubt about that. But they've essentially woven together these story arcs, and they've allowed, a Norse god, or I should say just a god, period, to be integrated into like a playboy's life, right? They found this way to weave this wonderful fabric where they're bringing together these amazing characters, and they're doing it in, like, in my opinion, in a real and compelling way. And I haven't seen all the movies, I have to tell you. I see what comes out on Netflix and what may be available on Apple TV. So I haven't even seen Venom for that matter, but I really appreciate how they've kind of woven these things together. And so once they get these assets, my belief is that it's going to take them some time to kind of figure out how to weave these things together. And according to what Kevin Feige was just talking about, he says that the only movie that they have announced that they're going to release is Spider-Man, and I think it's Far From Home, I want to say. That's the only movie I do believe that Marvel Studios has announced, and that is the Far From Home. Now, that's not to say that they don't have directors and writers working on other things like the Eternals and probably some Black Panther stuff, because they've said that they're going to make more of those, and then the Doc Strange. But again, I'm referring back to the podcast that I just listened to, and Kevin Feige was pretty clear about the fact that the only thing that they've really announced is the Spider-Man movie. And so there is essentially, to some degree or another, a blank slate out there that exists. But even with that blank slate, I don't think that they are suddenly going to be able to fill that slate with X-Men and Fantastic Four as quickly as some of these news articles are saying that they're going to do. And so I actually really, if you guys get a chance, I would just Google the podcast. I can't even remember the name of it off the top of my head, but it was actually a really good podcast. It was the first time that I'd ever really listened to Kevin Feige talk in any great length. But I think that there were really some cool nuggets that he was throwing out there over the course of this thing. And one of the things that he talked about was that he really enjoys bringing to life these characters and telling unique and creative stories in like the unexpected way. And for him, he looks at them all as like individual movies, but they're still connected in some way. And he also highlighted the fact, like with Black Panther, to some degree or another, that was influenced by James Bond. So think about Black Panther and think about how that could be influenced by James Bond. And for me, the scene that readily comes to mind, I think there's a couple. It is the sister basically serving as Q, right? She is like the technology arm of the agency. And then there's that scene in the casino where he was basically undercover, if you will, with the CIA there. That scene to me, I can see the influence of the James Bond there. And so Kevin Feige kind of talked about how they like to do things in unexpected ways. They like to draw material from different kinds of sources, i.e. like the James Bond. But he also highlighted that they are not just looking at the classic stories, even though, you know, there's 80 years of Marvel. They're not just looking at the classic stories created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby and John Romita. They are actually looking at some contemporary stuff for inspiration. And he cited Adi Granoff's Iron Man work as some place that they've looked for like inspiration to influence some of the things that they've done in their movies. So what was really clear to me was that throughout his career at Marvel, he goes back to the source material for inspiration and for solutions to challenges that they face in bringing these movies to life. And that's not to say that they, and you guys know this better than I, it's not to say that they do a cut and paste from the book to the movie, but they go back and they reference that rich history, that 80-year history of wonderful storytelling, and they use those threads, and they kind of weave it into the story that they're trying to tell when they bring it to life on screen. So I think it's really cool. So get caught up here real quick. Sith Lord says he can't wait for the cameos. Chad says there's some buzz about X-Men and Fantastic Four projects. Yeah, there is some buzz, but they don't own these assets. And the point of this video is that they haven't, according to Kevin Feige, they have not even begun to think about how to integrate those characters into the Marvel movies. And you would have to imagine that in the back of his head, they've thought about it. But again, he has professed that they have not yet been given the go-ahead to actually start doing any kind of work. But like anyone else that is creative, you gotta imagine that he's looking over there and oh, I think I can fit it here, or I think I can fit it there, Heavy, okay, let me scroll down here. Has anyone played Soul Reaver with sources for inspiration? That's the best source for inspiration, Sith Lord says, is some of it's 80 years, right? Whether you're talking about the old stuff or some of the new stuff, that's 80 years of material that can actually be pulled from, which I think is wonderful, I just think that that's really a good way for people to be able to still pay homage, if you will, to the history that is comics, but also keep it, I think, mainstream and lively for people nowadays. One of the I'll read this here. If I doesn't know, we don't know. As Bond, I'm waiting for the new Ghost Rider. So one of the things that someone brought up in a comic shop that I was in the other day was that there was a guy there, and he was looking for a Black Panther comic. And he wanted to buy the book because he wanted to cut the book up, to cut out a photo of the Black Panther and use it for an ornament. And I'm guessing it was probably for a kid or something like that. And there was just this discussion in the shop between the owner, this guy, and myself about the disconnect, if you will, between the movies and current comic books. And there seemed to be maybe a desire for someone who has seen the movie to be able to come into a comic shop and basically pick up a book that sounds and looks like the movie. And I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. It was just interesting. I had never really thought about how someone who watches a movie may be disconnected from a book that they actually pick up. Yes, it's the same character, but the tone is different. The backstory is different. The settings are probably going to be different. And I don't know whether I don't know whether, Marvel should create books that look like the movies, or whether the movies should look more like the books. I don't know what the answer is to that, but I just thought that was an interesting kind of moment as I was in the shop having that conversation. So, does Feige know something we don't know? Idris Elba selected as Bond. I don't know about that. That's actually a good comment. So, one of the things that he also alluded to, and this is maybe a good segue, Triple X, is that he alluded to the fact that they're going to have more diversity in the movies moving forward. Not just in front of the camera, but also in back of the camera. And you look at, I think her name is Cho, who was selected, the director selected for the Eternals movie. And Kevin Feige's whole thing is to promote from within and to diversify, not for the sake of diversity, but for the sake of improving storytelling. His thought was that if we have different points of view that are being represented by minorities, by women, by blacks, et cetera, that ultimately the group think dynamic is going to be that much stronger and the stories will be even more compelling. And I just thought it was interesting about that because the podcaster went down this path of, are you going to make more Black Panthers because of the success of Black Panther, or were you already doing Black Panther? And Kevin Feige basically said, we had always intended to go down this path, but the response of the audience basically compels us or gives us the assurance that the path that we're on is the right path. So I think that's a good sign, right? I think that's a good thought. You know, diversity for the sake of diversity is not my thing, but diversity for the sake of improving what it is that you are doing, I think is a wonderful notion. So does he know something about Idris Elba as being selected as Bond, and maybe there's something there? I don't know, because I actually didn't know that Idris Elba was selected as Bond. I know that women are crazy about Idris Elba, and I think he's a really talented actor. I became a fan of his back when he was doing The Wire back in the day and was nothing more than a drug dealer. And so I am a huge fan. There's only one movie of his that I was not able to watch because of the subject matter, but I am definitely a fan of Idris Elba. So Chris says he's waiting for the new Ghost Rider. Do you know if they're going to use, what is his name, Robbie Reyes? Are they going to use Robbie Reyes? Because I actually picked up that #1 after he appeared in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And I like Robbie Reyes. I think he's a cool character. I think he's a cool Ghost Rider. So that could be really cool if they actually bring it to life. Scrolling through the comments here. So Doominator says he really hopes that the comics don't look like the movies. I would probably agree with that. You know, the question is, should they create one version of a comic that looks like the movies in order to onboard fans of the movie and to get them into comics, right? Maybe is that the way to go? I don't know. Captain Marvel could be the first example. All right, I think that was disconnected for that one. So he says, what about Guardians? There was no mention of Guardians. There was actually no mention of James Gunn. The podcaster made a comment about the diversity of the directors that are being selected. You know, the fact that many of them come from independent films and things like that. He mentioned in a list of directors, he mentioned James Gunn, but I did not hear James Gunn mentioned by Kevin Feige at all. And, you know, you probably know why. Not worried about, so Bake the Snake says, I'm worried about Guardians for different reasons and not CGI. I haven't seen Bird Box, Brandon. I've seen the clips of it, and basically, for those that don't know, I think the synopsis of this thing is that there is some kind of evil out there, and I guess the evil presents as your worst fear. That is, if you look the entity in its eye. But if you don't look it in its eye, then it's unable to, I guess, present that worst fear to you. So it's a story of a woman and her kids that are traveling to this place where I guess the evil does not exist, but they must do it blindfolded so as to not be killed by this evil. And I honestly, that's all I know about it. I don't know anyone that's seen it. When I mentioned the synopsis to my wife, because she was like, Bird Box, what is Bird Box? And I read it to her and she's like, not interested. So my wife is honestly the reason why I don't go to very many movies, because she is not much of a TV watcher, nor is she much of a movie goer. So that's part of the reason why I don't really go. So here, Guardians were funny, so it didn't have, this thing is going so fast. Bake the Snake says he doesn't want his comics to be like the movies. He doesn't want Jason Momoa or Robert Downey Jr. on any of his comic books. I respect that, brother. I respect that. So Chino Comics and More says, welcome to the channel, brother. I think you are a new subscriber. I actually give you a shout out in an upcoming video, so stay tuned for that. He says that Bird Box is awesome. So there you go. That's one person I thought was really cool. Big did they find Nick Fury and Samuel L. Jackson. What's crazy is, speaking of Samuel L. Jackson, I think it was in Iron Man that at the end, Samuel L. Jackson makes a cameo. And I didn't know this, but Kevin Feige says that they didn't even have a deal with Samuel L. Jackson for him to do any movies at all. they actually reached out to him and he came in because he's a fan. I guess he's a fan of comics or a fan of Kevin Feige. It wasn't quite clear who he was or what he was a fan of, but he actually came in and he filmed that cameo and there was actually no deal in place. And so the podcaster basically said, hey, were you worried that, you know, that movie could flop and that those cameo appearances would never be brought to life? And I guess the response was, well, there's always that risk, but that's the chance that you take. And I think that they believed in the source material, they believed in the movie, and thankfully it all worked out. But he kind of alluded to the fact that they did this without a real game plan. And I think if you think about all the videos that are created about what was done in the movie and how what was done in the movie or cameoed in the movie or mentioned in the movie or in the background of the movie is tied to something else, you just wonder if there is any truth in some of that stuff. You know, you just wonder if some of that stuff is done as a loose thread that may or may not ever get pulled tight, you know, as evidenced by this cameo by Samuel L. Jackson when there was absolutely no agreement in place. So Erod212 says books do not need to replicate the movies. But again, do you think that for the moviegoer, and you have to think about all of the people that watch the movies that don't actually read comics, and is there a way to funnel some of those viewers into readers of comics, right? And so is there a way to create a book for those people that might transition them into the comics, right? Like I personally, you know, some points have been made here that they don't want Robert Downey Jr. in their books. But could that be a way to go for Marvel to continue growing the fan base for the source material, that being for modern comics? Walking Dead comics, I can't read that one. That one got away from me. Battle Scars 4, you talking about Coulson? Someone really just had that one the other day. So I can't remember who I was watching, but I was on last night with JD and he actually showed Battle Scars 4, which is the first appearance of Coulson. That was really cool. I feel like Ghost Rider gets the MCU treatment. It would be amazing. Chris, you are probably right about that. And there was a rumor about the Ghost Rider actually getting his own TV show, and who knows whether that could happen. But when I heard that he was going to be on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., I kind of wondered how they were going to do the special effects for his flame and for his chain. But they actually did it really well. If you guys haven't seen like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., you should check it out. You really should check it out, especially the Ghost Rider segments. They're actually really, really well done. So they did X-Men direct comic tie-ins with the movies. Yep. Gray Matter Hulk is making some couple of comments here. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is definitely a good show. Kid wrote letters helping in response, and they did. Years later, he gets Marvel Comics deal. Scrolling through, trying to get caught up on some of this. To read comics, at least the older people is getting into kids. Yep, there you go. Geeks, Drinks, and Comics is making a good point there. It's better, Chino Comics and More says, it's better for us collectors for the movies to tap into comics. So if you're collecting for investment or for your kids, then they will continue to live on. Correction, Battle Scars #1 is the first Nick Fury Jr. who is drawn at. That is a very good. Oh, I see where you're going, Erod. Yep, I believe that is indeed correct. Matt, how you doing, brother? So yeah, I mean, for those that are coming into the room, one of the things, we've kind of meandered through several different topics, but one of the main reasons why I did this quick impromptu video was to speak on some of the fake news, at least that I see out in the market right now, about Kevin Feige's announcement that the Fantastic Four and the X-Men were going to be pulled into the MCU in the next 6 months. That is not true. At least that is not true based upon my interpretation after listening to a 51-minute interview, of which 8 minutes or so dealt with the Fox Disney deal, of which maybe a minute or two was really focused on this specific question. And so I think that there is a little bit of hype out there right now about this particular topic. I genuinely do not feel that the X-Men and the Fantastic Four will be making an appearance anytime before like 2020. Maybe a cameo or something like that, but I don't anticipate them making an appearance, because what we don't know is all of the contracts, right, with the studios for these actors, right? Assuming that they're going to use the same actors. But you would have to, if you don't use some of the same actors that were in the previous things, and I don't know that they should, you're going to have to find actors that can play these roles. You're going to have to contract with them. And do you put a contract in place for 1 year, or do you put a contract in place for multiple years? And if you're smart, you probably do multiple years, which means that you have to have multiple stories, at least in my mind, somewhat whiteboarded out. So you kind of know that you're going to need this character. And so I don't know that that stuff has really taken place yet, you know. And then you also have all of the work that's already been done on the MCU as a whole. And now you would have to go back and weave these new characters in. Like, how would you even introduce the X-Men, right? Where have the X-Men been for the last 10 years that Marvel Studios has been making movies, right? And I think there's a way to do it. I think there's a way to integrate them in. And there's a ton of videos online that talk about this. But I don't think that you could do that overnight, right? You may have to plant some of those seeds in a few movies, maybe one or two, maybe, right? To really have it make sense. And that seems to be the way that the MCU works, is that they plant a couple of seeds and they let it grow a little bit and then it comes out, right? It isn't like just immediately dropped in and then it becomes this thing. And so I don't know if this is going to be one of those things that just happens overnight versus maybe something that has to be mapped out, planned out in terms of the movies, but then also in terms of the contracts with the individual actors, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, Geeks, Drinks, and Comic Says agree FF4 and X-Men are still going to be a few years out. But brother, when they do drop, it is going to be amazing, right? It is going to be amazing to see the X-Men and the FF in the MCU, to see them on the big screen and to see them being done right. It will be impressive, right? And I mean, I'm gonna be honest with you. I've watched all of the X-Men movies. I watched them all. And I think they're all fun. They're all sources of entertainment. But when you look at what they do in the MCU under Kevin Feige, it is different, right? I was a Guardians of the Galaxy fan back in the 90s, and I have a whole run of Guardians of the Galaxy, right, that I absolutely just loved when I was younger. And to see them brought to life on the screen, it made me love the characters even more, because it was hilarious. The humor of like Groot and Rocket Raccoon and Star-Lord, it was amazing to see this stuff come to life. And the X-Men are my favorite team, and to see them come to life on screen and be treated in the MCU fashion, incredible. Incredible. So Chino Comics says X-Men and FF will be in Marvel Universe. The Russo brothers have said that they would come back and do Secret Wars. Secret Wars would be incredible. It would be incredible. That would be incredible, I have to tell you. Then I think one of the things that they're going to have to do, Erod says he agrees that the seeds need to be planted either in the form of a quick cameo or mentioning of mutants. Yes. There was some discussion around like the idea of the Terrigen mist or something like that spreading, and the Terrigen mist is what actually brings mutants to life. You know, they could plant some seeds in the Eternals. If you think about the Eternals, right, they're going back, and they could also do it in Captain Marvel. Both of those movies are going back to the 90s, right? Which I think predates the MCU. And so in both of those movies, you have, and because I think even let me focus on one thing at a time. So if you look at the Eternals, that is going to be way back in time. And if you know anything about the Eternals and the Celestials and the Deviants, right, that what was done there, especially in the retcon, actually speaks to mutants. Right? It speaks to essentially gods, it speaks to mutants, and it speaks to man, and it speaks to deviants, which are essentially our mutations, right? So the seeds of the X-Men and mutants as a whole could be planted in the Eternals movie, where they've already selected a director and 2 writers to work on the project. And then if you look at Captain Marvel, which is coming out sooner rather than later, they could actually plant some seeds there as well, because that, I think, is set in the 90s, which predates the MCU timeline, at least I believe. And so they could even plant some seeds there. So I think that the way they're going to have to find a way to introduce it before there being like an X-Men movie. At least, again, that is my belief. They're doing some stuff in the cosmic landscape which could plant some seeds for the Fantastic Four. They could do that in the Captain Marvel movie, but I don't think that that's going to be likely. They can do it in the Guardians of the Galaxy movie now that that's been delayed. But outside of that, they're going to have to find a way to weave that in, you know? Even if they did Secret Wars, the Secret Wars involved mutants, the FF, and then a host of other characters that have yet to be introduced. And what was cool is that was one of the things that Kevin Feige kind of talked about, is that they are looking forward to continuing to bring more and more characters to life on the big screen, and in unexpected ways. And so I think he alluded to the fact that there was like 8,000 or 10,000 characters out there in the 80-year history of Marvel. And so anyone that says that, you know, they can absolutely predict which character is going to make an appearance next, is with that many characters, it's impossible. But it is definitely fun to speculate. And I have several videos on speculation, but this stuff is all fun. That's what makes some of this stuff really fun, is that no one really has the answer, but it's fun to think about it. It's fun to play around with. So get caught up here. Someone was making a comment about Secret Wars would be amazing. Richard says, I like the X-Men in their own separate universe. Their story of persecution just works better when they're kept separate from the other heroes. Maybe, maybe not. I think that you can still kind of have a pocket universe, if you will. I mean, because you think about it, there are things that happen in Wakanda that are to some degree in isolation and at the same time connected. There are things that happen with Thor that are in isolation that still tie back. Guardians of the Galaxy, same way. I think that there's ways that, just like in the real Marvel comics, they're all in the same universe, but they where necessary have ties to one another. So I think that I think that there's a way to do it, right? And I think that these guys that are, and gals that are working on the MCU can find a way to do it. I really do. But I think, you know, if every movie with the X-Men involves another character or another team, or I don't know that that's going to work, because just the comics themselves, the X-Men are typically unto themselves. And that's one of the things that I really like about it, you know? I mean, you even think about like Spider-Man. Spider-Man is he fights crime, right? He doesn't necessarily always battle these super powerful entities, but we've seen him do it in comics, and we've also seen him fight street level dealers and burglars and stuff like that. So, you know, he was in Secret Wars, right? E-Rod says, actually, the Terrigen Mist was killing mutants at one point. Yeah, depends on which retcon version you believe, right? But yeah, that was one way that you could potentially introduce it, is through some kind of mist, which basically goes, if you will, worldwide, which affects people everywhere. And so that could be one way that they could modify the Terrigen Mist idea and bring mutants to the forefront. Brandon says Scarlet Witch is a mutant, and it was in some MCU book not too long ago, the experiments that was done on her, unlocking them. Yep. There's a fan clip on YouTube that shows an A in the Stark building, so it looks like a 4. That's pretty cool. I had to check that out. Oh, HME3 calls for a Marvel DC crossover. Do you think DC is ready for that? Do you think DC is ready for that? People don't seem to really enjoy the DC movies as much as the Marvel movies. So I'm curious if we think that could actually work. Christopher Shea is asking, are we thinking the New Mutants maybe worth something someday? New Mutants run. I don't know. I don't know about that one. RoboGod, I'll get back to that in 1 second. Yeah, E-Rod, Spider-Man definitely is a local hero. Well, depends on your definition of hero, right? Yeah, Chino says they aren't ready because Marvel will own DC. There is some cool DC out there. I'm gonna be honest with you. I actually have a video idea on my board that I may actually do about some of the DC assets. Like, I watch Supergirl. I watch Supergirl because, one, I think it's really well done, and it's also kid friendly, so I can like watch it during the day and not have my kids exposed to all kinds of you know, fighting and too much violence and certainly crude language. But I think that Supergirl show is actually a pretty good one, you know. HME says, I know it was given some thought the other day. I was confused as to why or how Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver are in the Avengers movies. Yeah, no clue. Chino says he's obsessed with Marvel. All right, so just grab those two. Wait, which one did you grab? The Eternals? Yeah, if you haven't grabbed the Eternals, I'm telling you, grab it. I actually have a video coming out this soon that actually talks about this. So Mr. Miracle Comics says the Celestials created mutants, the Eternals, and then Thanos is a Titan, but the Eternals too, first appearance of the Celestials. Yeah, and actually again have a video coming out about that very soon. But you know, the Celestials could be one way in which they actually, you know, introduce the mutants. And you know, this is some Jack Kirby stuff, man, that I think is really, really well done. And again, awesome video I have coming out possibly next week. I can't remember, but that could be one way that they can actually do it and actually tie back to some really cool source material, that being the original Eternals series. So if you guys haven't picked that up, I definitely encourage you guys to snag that, one, because it's Jack Kirby's work, but also two, because it could be brought to life in a really compelling way. So you guys are having a little bit of a conversation here about how I think Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver made it into the movies. Just the same way I think that Spider-Man made it into some movies. There was a deal that was struck for the asset to be able to pull it into the MCU. Sometimes it's a single deal, sometimes it's a multi video deal or movie deal. So it just depends on what they want to do. So all right, so again, we'll do the recap announcement one more time for the people that have come in a little late. There is a lot of news out there right now. If you do a quick search on like Kevin Feige, there is some news out there where people are basically saying that Kevin Feige has said that the Fantastic Four and X-Men will be integrated into the MCU in the next 6 months. And that is just not accurate in my understanding and interpretation of the interview. Essentially what he was alluding to was that there would be maybe the finalization of the deal between Fox and Disney regarding the merger, and that, you know, within that 6 months that deal was looking good, I think kind of is the term that he phrased. The question was, you know, have you guys started to play with the Fox assets? And basically his answer was the deal is looking good, but that wasn't a direct answer to the question. And people that are pulling out blog posts and news articles are basically saying, hey, these characters are going to be dropping into the movies in the next 6 months, so you better pick up your keys right now. And that is a lot of speculative hype that causes scarcity. And when you have scarcity, you have prices that get stupid high unnecessarily because they're not really rooted in anything that is based upon facts. So I wanted to just record this video to basically say, hey, don't believe the hype. Go do your research. Listen to the interview for yourself. Make up your own mind, right, as to when you think realistically these characters can make their way into the movies, right? Because I still have some of these characters that I want to pick up myself, and some of these books that I want to pick up myself. So I don't want I don't want these prices to get too crazy, because I still want to pick some of these books up because I'm a fan of the book, not necessarily because I'm trying to make some crazy money. It's just that I don't want to spend crazy money to get a book when I can get it a little bit cheaper because there's no speculation around it. So hopefully you guys, Chino Comics and More, he says he's getting Hulk 1 and FF1. I want to be like you, brother, when I grow up. I want to be like you. I want to be your friend. I love signed comics. How you doing, brother? Welcome to the live stream. So I want to thank you guys, Robo God, a couple of new people in here I want to shout out. I want to thank you guys for hanging out with me for just a little bit. I'm going to go spend some more time with the family, but I wanted to jump on here real quick to do this quick fake news breakdown for you guys. I absolutely appreciate you guys hanging out with me for just a little bit. And as always, if you guys want to chat about anything, let me know. And before I let you go, I do have a couple of slabs that I'm selling right now. I have Amazing Spider-Man number 100 that is up for sale. I have Miss Marvel number 1 9.6. This is a really cool book. And then the last one is a Venom #1. So if you guys follow me on Instagram, you probably saw that I offered up, I think it was like 6 or 7 books yesterday. All of those books actually sold. These are the last 3 that I have. So if anyone's interested, drop me a message. Basically what I'm doing is taking the average of the last couple of sales on Go Collect, and I'm discounting it by like 10 bucks or so, and that's the price, except for like this book, for example, The Amazing Spider-Man #100. There's only one sale of this particular book, and it was 90 bucks, and I'd like to, if I can, get 90 bucks for it, because I think it's a really cool book. I have another one on the wall here, but this is essentially a decent book, I think, and a hard one to come by. So again, if you guys are interested, you can find me on RegieCollects on Instagram, or you can send me an email at regiecollects@gmail.com, and Regie is R-E-G-I-E, just one G. Why? Who the heck knows? But thank you guys for hanging out with me just a little bit. Hopefully you guys will enjoy the rest of your day.